Fast forward, yini komo ewo channel yiso aha AGH Politics Avenue. Political stories are trending at Miku wiki headlines. Any jimre na inibi exum ewo ha anidium ahombraxium. Mesrok se yombo in simu. Onye ye queen simma Zenator Rawlings and omeno kase wotimia hit hard on critics omo eka kasibia ensem fata efa ni papa nyasem koto Akroma efa ni revolution time. You may be a papa ni dia ibini hu se ko ifin na omo akyerese papa no de oyibia na your mind hodo omani yo intina ma papa no eri exa na wa fall victim bia no na wo deserve nti wa hit hard on omo keka nsimpi efa ni papa ho a onua enya asem koto Akroma. At this point in time yemu Zenator Rawlings nsimu ni hwani yako edieba aha AGH Politics Avenue.
This is an automatic reading of the article. Zenator hits back at critics over attacks on Rawlings' revolutionary legacy. Korol-Klati MP Dr. Zenator Rawlings has defended her late father, former President Jerry John Rawlings, against ongoing criticism over his role in Ghana's revolution, asserting that she will never publicly or privately disown her parents. Speaking on the Joy News podcast Talk No Day Cook Rice, Dr. Rawlings described personal attacks linked to her father's legacy as immature and cowardly. "I will not publicly or privately turn my back on my parents because I know what they did," she stated. Sometimes, the loudest voice is not the most honest voice. Acknowledging that her father's leadership during the revolution was not universally praised, she emphasized that public perception has often been shaped by misinformation. She added that many accusations against him were largely disconnected from his direct actions. "I'm not under any illusion that my father was loved by everyone. There has been a lot of misinformation," she said. As a leader, he decided that he would let the buck stop with him. "A lot of things people accused him of had nothing to do with him, but he took it all on because that's what leaders do." Dr. Rawlings also suggested that some individuals with intimate knowledge of the truth behind key events in Ghana's political history have remained silent, choosing not to correct the public record. "There are people who know the actual truth we are still alive today, but for reasons best known to them, they've kept quiet about what they know to be the truth about a lot of things that happened," she said. She highlighted that her father had publicly acknowledged the excesses of the revolution and had offered apologies on several platforms, including for actions carried out by individuals operating outside his awareness. "On multiple occasions, my father apologized for the excesses of the revolution, including on behalf of people who did things he was not aware of," she explained. Turning her attention to personal attacks, the MP condemned what she described as the tendency of some individuals to attack her simply because of her father. "In a society where people feel they must have a swipe at the child of someone because of their disdain for the parent, I'm not quite sure it shows some level of maturity. I am very conscious of that. I have no respect for people who are cowards. If you have something to say, own up and say it's you. Own what you've said," she added. "I don't appreciate people who feel they should be callous just because they can." Source: Emmanuel Tete. Also read, Zenator Rawlings calls for urgent government action on CMB Abuja market land dispute. Why Rawlings should not be compared to Nkrumah, Sekou Nkrumah.
I'll be frank with you that I was really pleased with the speech,
And listen,
to the extent that I reached out to Mr. President to tell him how proud he had made us, all Ghanaians, all Africans, for a speech very eloquently and very well delivered. So I indeed was really impressed with the quality of the speech, the eloquence of its delivery, and the content of the speech. If you can say so, it ticked all the boxes. Talking about our national context, because this is, after all, a platform where all countries come to talk about their own national situation. The regional context, as Africa, and Ghana is always known to be a strong voice for Africa. The president did not miss that. And then, of course, he talked, as you know, about the geopolitical context, the decline of multilateralism at a time when some will say we need it most, and also the wars going on, and other challenges, climate, migration. So it was a very comprehensive speech, long enough to cover all the bases, but short enough to keep everyone really interested in what he was saying.
And we'll come to some of the specifics, because some of the things he talked about, controversial, also because of the powers he was taking on when he spoke about them. So we'll talk about that pretty shortly. Let me bring in Dr. Bafo Dumendia. What stood out for you, Doc?
First, what stood out for me, but please, before then, let me pay my respects to my senior, Dr. Ibn Chambers, a dynamic African nationalist and diplomat, and I have high regards for him, just as I have for my own brother, Fattah Musa, who worked together in years past. And my good friend there, I don't have met him, but my respects to all of them. Now to the question. First, for me, it was a first time in a very long time that I've heard an African leader at the UN taking on critical issues in such a bold way. It reminded me of Kwame Nkrumah's days, the early post-independence era, when our leaders, Nyerere and the others, and Nkrumah, of course, going to the UN and making our case for the world to listen to us. So when I heard the president's speech, it reminded me of that. I was old enough to see and hear President Akroma talking. You see, we have so many challenges that our leaders tend to kind of either out of timidity or because our hands are in their mouths, so we don't want to hit them hard and that kind of stuff. And it's gone for so long. As the president said, if that bird cracks like a duck and looks like a duck and walks like one, please, let's say it's a duck. And that really impressed me. So when you tackle the issue of immigration, the way the Western countries are treating Africans in particular, the way the international financial agencies are simply exploiting us, and many others that he raised. So in a nutshell, for me, it was the boldest speech I've heard from an African leader in a very, very long time. And I was very pleased with it. I was very pleased.
And Abdul Fattah, from you, of course, represent ECOWAS in this conversation. He was speaking not only for Ghana, he was talking for the continent, indeed. And one part of this that epitomized this is when he talked about it took on the US for the blockade against Cuba, because he says the Cubans sacrificed here on the continent, and we've seen that Ghana has been beneficiary of the Cuban doctors and nurses that they ship abroad, and many African countries. But beyond that, he was speaking for a continent that often has been seen as timid. Our leaders often, because we go cap in hand, unable to take on the global system and global leaders who we fear when we go back to them may cite our bold statements against us and may not give us what we're asking for. But he dared take on a global order on behalf of the sub-region and also the continent. I wonder what the reaction has been at ECOWAS and whether or not among yourselves there, this caught attention. Please unmute for me, Abdul Fattah. I believe we still have him, correct? Yes, please unmute for me. Okay, we'll try and fix that. I know he's trying to unmute because he's on. And then once we get that sorted, I'll get back to him on that. But let's come to Dr. Alex Vines on that point, though. And I want to take some of the specifics. On the Cuban point, it was taken on the U.S. And by the way, the United Nations have countless occasions through resolutions condemned the U.S. for the blockade. Nothing has happened. Was there any strategic advantage for him and for Ghana, by the way? Because everybody goes to the UN. It's your interest first. Yes, you must speak beyond your local country, preference and what your people want, but you must advance the interests of your people. But he dares speak for the continent in a way where he was taking on a country as powerful as the US.
Yeah. So, I mean, the extraordinary thing is that President Mahama's UNGA speech last week cut through in a way that lots of UNGA speeches don't. And I have a feeling that this is a president that wants to show global leadership in the South. And so he does have an ambition and aspiration to kind of step up to the plate and challenge the global North. So it could well be that Mahama, during the time he was out of office, has been considering what are the areas that he might actually focus Ghana's foreign policy. He's been using various fora, like the TANA Fora, which he was chair of, as a laboratory for some of his ideas, because I've seen him in action, testing out ideas in that way. So he was spending the time out of office preparing for this moment. And yes, he's confronted Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump gets confronted quite regularly. The Cuban issue is clearly a bit of a red rag to a bull. It's a very emotive issue for the US administration. But the Cubans did play a constructive role on the African continent. I myself have seen the role that the Cubans played in Angola, for example. 6% of the Cuban population served in the Angolan war in support of the government of Angola against South African destabilization.
What is the strategic benefit?
Recognized.
What is the strategic benefit of taking on this issue, say for him, for Ghana, in the global context? Is there any?
It is about the numbers game and getting support for Ghana for particular ambitions that Ghana may decide it wants in terms of global governance reform. And so I do see this as an opportunity that Ghana is looking at. Numbers really matter, both at the UN General Assembly and also obviously in the Security Council and other forum. And I think we're seeing a more assertive Ghana emerge in international diplomacy.
And that's a very important point I want to put to. Do have Abdul Fattah on and his microphone working correctly? Okay, we'll try and fix it and I'll bring that. But I'll bring in Dr. Mohammed Ibn Chambers on that point. Do you agree that there's some strategic benefit there for us in enhancing Ghana's place in global affairs?
No question. Ghana has been known to be very forthright, to be principled, and to stand for what is just, what is right. And I might say that specifically on the issue of Cuba, President Mahama's position is completely in alignment with the majority of UN members, including, for instance, the European Union countries. They've all been calling for the EU as far back as when I was working in Brussels at ACP EU, as far back as then, had always been voting against UN position. The UN position, US position is a very minority position on Cuba. And so there, frankly, I do not see a huge risk in repeating what every Ghanaian president has held and stated and believed in. That's our official foreign policy position over the years. It's a matter of justice, and President Mahama was very consistent in highlighting that point. Besides, I mean, you mentioned in your introduction, Ghana continues to benefit tremendously from Cuban training of Ghanaian doctors. As we speak now, there are probably hundreds of Ghanaians who are being trained in Cuba. We want to maintain that relations. Today, it's not too many countries who give us scholarship to train our doctors. And the principal line that the president drew there was to say, we have friends to all and enemies to none. So by taking that position, we don't define it as a hostile position against the United States. No, the United States is a friendly country to Ghana. We want to maintain that friendly relationships. At the same time, when there are issues that need to be addressed on the international scene, Ghana will do so forthrightly and in line with our aspiration always to be a people of dignity, a people of pride, who stand for principle and not for expediency.
And on that point, Dr. Balfour Jumendria, he did something similar on the Gaza situation. But the part of it that struck me is he was one of the very few leaders who spoke, who singled out, called out the U.S. for denying the Palestinian leaders visa. And I felt that was really courageous, because this is him now being very frontal with Trump. Because obviously, as we know, Trump would have taken the decision to say his administration, he would have known about this, because it was unprecedented. Because the UN Charter, from what I read, actually obligates the United States to grant visas for traveling heads of state going to the UN. And yet, it happened for the very first time. Then you have an African leader who goes there, looks and the eye straight into the Americans and say that was the wrong thing to do, while condemning what is happening in Gaza. And that is where he said, if it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, you must call it a duck. That was bold, was it not? Kindly unmute for me. I don't have your audio.
Amo.
Yes, I have you now. Yes, I have you now.
Oh, it's you?
Hello.
Hello.
Whilst you're trying to fix that, I want my audience who missed that to watch John Mahama on this point.
And supported a two-state solution to the conflict since then. And I say, contrary to the claims of some, a two-state solution would not be a reward for Hamas. It would rather be a reprieve for the hundreds of thousands of innocent women and children and people who are facing collective punishment and forced starvation for no reason other than the fact that they are Palestinian. For nearly 2 years, and for the fear of reprisals, we here in this General Assembly have been playing hide and seek with language to find the right words to help us avoid or excuse what we all know is taking place in Gaza. But here's the thing, it doesn't matter what you call it. If it looks like a duck, it swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, well, then it must be a duck. The crimes in Gaza must stop.
Okay. Yes. Professor Balfour Jumendria, your thoughts on that?
Presentation by the president. Excellent, because many countries have been very timid about expressing themselves because of the fear of the Americans and particularly of the Israelis. Israel is well planted across this continent, including our own country, Ghana.
Yep.
I know recently when some statement was issued on this matter, the Israeli ambassador came out calling a press conference and making some interesting, for me, out of place comments.
Because he actually was here on my show. I interviewed him on that subject, and he was very frontal as in questioning government position on the subject.
And the same way, after the president's speech, he held a press conference again, in a way saying the president came very bold and all. But I could not understand. Maybe Dr. Bin Chambers, who's a veteran in this area, can help us. How can an ambassador in our country always seeking to respond through the media to the president? He's not here for that. No Ghanaian ambassador goes to Israel or America and respond to the statements by that country's president. So anyway, that is just by the way. But I think, like David said earlier, the president really, the 4 years he was out of office, has done him some real good. He has had deep reflections on world situation, the situation in our own country. Domestically, he's calling his program a resetting, and he carried it with him to the United Nations, where he also called for the world to reset. And the resetting, that also affects world peace, all these conflicts that we're having around us. I think that was the basis for his stridency in making that statement. And I think, as I say, he's really brought back the spirit that most Africans want to see, especially the young people. Because for many years, Africa's international diplomacy at the UN has been nearly non-existent, besides platitudes that they go to share with the rest of us. So I think President Mahama certainly strategically is positioning himself to capture the leadership of the continent, because so far it's hard for anyone to single out an African country who's leading the Pan-Africanism of old. It's so difficult to find an African leader who stands firmly. Of course, we have to respect President Ramaphosa of South Africa, who really went to the ICC and got the Israelis, to be declared.
But while you mentioned him, there was a risk there. He did that, and then we saw him in the White House being humiliated by Trump, and everybody was stand your ground. He went there, and Trump, as Trump always used to do, start citing evidence that was non-existent, but he felt he needed to do that because he was...
We ain't some who Timmy Coast watching on us, Mamma, so yem, the Senate so bad in the Dumbi Edominia. Onya, you move, Nayan saying soon we